Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. On the latest episode of AI Unleashed, I have the pleasure of talking with David Chestnut, who I have also had the pleasure a number of times throughout 2025 and 24, in fact, of being on stage with and sharing discussions both on stage and off stage. So for those of you who don't know, when you're speaking on panels and you're doing, shows and things like that, you always have prep calls, you always have connection calls, and, you get the chance both on stage and off stage to exchange some great ideas. So today's going to be a very exciting episode, and we're going to let you guys in a little bit on the kind of things we talk about. So David, welcome.
Ash, always good to see you, my friend. Thanks for having me there. And the good news is when you end up on panels with folks like Ash, you seek them out afterwards and before, because you can't, there's only a small number of people in the world that really nerd out about the same stuff that we do. So thanks, Ash. For your listeners that don't know me, my name is David Chestnut. I work at Accenture. For those that don't know what Accenture is, we're the biggest company you've never heard of. We're around 800,000 employees, professional services, everything from strategy all the way through managed services, data and AI. And for the last 5-ish years, I had the pleasure of running their technology, data and AI, and Gen AI transformation. So the learning strategy around making sure that 800,000 people became experts in something that didn't exist last week. And so that's but as you know, and as we've talked about, I've transitioned my role and I'm now working back with our clients again. So I'm splitting my time between teaching our folks how to work differently with AI, advising CHROs and chief learning officers on how to transform their organizations, and essentially getting to go and talk to folks like you at events where we try and teach people how to handle this very weird and very uncertain time to be in the human behavior business.
So one of the things that you just said is probably a great keyword for what we're going to talk about, because you mentioned using AI differently, working with AI differently. And that really is the topic of today. How do we go beyond in true Dragon Ball Z terms? How do we take it even further beyond? So with that, we first of all, let's set a baseline. So the baseline that I tend to see when I'm working with organizations is a one-to-one relationship between an employee and an application, which could be a Copilot, a GPT, a Gemini, a Claude, something like that. And in that one-to-one relationship, you tend to have sort of zero shot, one shot, maybe a couple of prompts, which then yield a response and folks go away with that. Is that basically what we can establish as the previous norm before we think about going beyond?
I think that even that sometimes that norm is aspirational in some organizations, right? So, but I absolutely say, like, we're going to say someone calls themselves I'm a baseline AI user. I think that's the right baseline to start from.
So what are the problems with that baseline? Because if you say that's not necessarily the norm, that's an aspiration, what's stopping people from getting to this point, do you think?
So I have a couple of thoughts here, but the one that I've noticed is I think the organizations that ran so fast, so early, we taught them about something once. We taught them about this thing that is changing hourly, minute by minute. Gemini 3 yesterday, OpenAI 5.1 a couple days ago, Claude skills, all of these things that are happening so quickly. We ran out in front and we taught people that AI is this new thing. We don't really know what it does. And by the way, it's probably wrong, whatever it tells you, but go have fun and get 40% more efficient. And then I think we stopped teaching people, or we maybe mentally people said, that's enough for me. It's not for me. This thing will pass. It's another technology fad that I'll wait for the real work to continue. And I think, when I go and I teach, our folks internally, external, if you ask them what one word they know about AI, it's not LLM, it's not neural net, it's hallucination. And I think we've done ourselves a disservice by saying, be careful, and saying, use this thing for everything you do. And what little boilerplate have we put at the bottom of every output? This is probably crap. Don't listen. So I think that sometimes is a reason that's gotten us there. I think some organizations went so fast that it was not an endurable change for folks. We didn't give them the tools to stay up to date and change how they work with this which I think is part of why we're talking today.
So one of my perspectives, which is not necessarily an AI perspective, this is just a world of work perspective, is that folks who are hungry and ambitious will find the way to succeed. And in the passive language that you've just said, we've given them the tools. Yeah, we give them the tools. What do they do with the tools? Because the ones who are determined to succeed, Rocky 3, Eye of the Tiger, that kind of thing, those who are determined to succeed will find a way to do it. So to what extent, and this is the challenge to what you just said, to what extent is this one shot. I know I'm using the term one shot, but this kind of one shot training and then go and play. You would expect to see a distribution of ambition, a distribution of skill sets starting to emerge from folks who maybe, as you rightly said, will just say, I don't really trust this, whatever, I'm not going to use it, all the way through to the folks who are power users. So we should expect that distribution to arise in organizations, but we're not really seeing that, right? So is there a kernel of something else?
Slide 2, right? In my mental explanation here, but it really comes around to 2 pieces again. Also, the initial tools we put in their hands were poor in many cases. They had been shown this promise of ChatGPT. Everyone went out and downloaded it, put it on their phone or some version, and they were able to do what seemingly miraculous things, right? Take this email and, this 100-page document and give me 5 bullets. Oh my gosh, it's done. This would have taken me hours. So we saw that little kernel of amazingness, and then we went out and what did we do? We turned it loose on our KX in our organizations and our knowledge management system, which has SharePoint documents from Lord knows when. And we expected this magic thing called RAG to just sort it all out for us. And then we put an untrained chatbot with GPT-3 on top of it and said, everyone use this for everything. In the end, the results came back poor. And I think so people were already told to be apprehensive. We put poor tools in their hands, but even let's say everyone did everything right. We put good tools in their hands. We trained them over time how to use them. We still didn't change the work around them to accommodate this kind of work. We still have the M-dash stigma, right? Did you use AI to do this? Tee-hee, right? And it's an expectation. Of course I did. Why aren't you? And I think that's also a cultural thing. We are still a little bit very sheepish when we say, yes, AI helped me write this. AI helped me create this deliverable. So I think there's a compounding effect that's flattening out our distribution curve.
Yeah. Do you think that kind of AI shame is going to go away at any point? Because I feel, for the record, everyone who's listening, I feel no shame in using AI. I will use it. I would use it to cook breakfast if I could, frankly.
Yes.
But yeah. I was on a meeting earlier today and I was experimenting for the first time with Notion AI transcript feature because I use Notion a lot, but I've not used the transcript feature because I tend not to transcribe or invite AI recording bots onto my calls. But I was using this and I said to the guy I was on a call with, can we try it out? I want to try it out. Now, the reason I wanted to try it out was, of course, you get the transcript, you get your key actions. But the thing I wanted to try after that, and I shared my screen while we were on the call. I said, right, the thing I want to try now is we've got the transcript of what we've just spoken about. I want that to now generate an action plan with all the artifacts. So we're going to maybe write a couple of articles together. Fine, give us the topics based on what we've discussed. And then I was using the Claude Notion MCP.
Yep.
Now that we've got the list of things we need to do, create the action plan, create the strategy, create the go-to-market, write the drafts of the articles, do it all in separate pages in that same Notion area. The whole thing took maybe 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And for that to be such an accelerator and us to then somehow feel shame around doing it seems paradoxical in the revolution of work. So, for anyone who's listening, go out and use these things, right?
Yes.
But that takes us on to this idea. So this is like establishing the baseline from which we then go further beyond. And this is a little taste of how you go further beyond. You and I have spoken about workflows, the digital workforce, the agentic workforce, and how that needs to map with human hierarchies and get that synergy together. There's also organizational design, what that needs to look like. You've just mentioned that around, restructuring work for people. So let's talk about all of those things in no particular order. Dealer's choice. You go for it. What do you think?
Well, I will tell you the one thing that I'm spending most of my time excited about right now, and it's nice because it happens to intersect with what I'm doing with our clients, is thinking of this notion of like, how do you create these sort of super workers, right? I mean, obviously I deal with the HR organization a lot, but I'm working across organizations. And what I end up seeing is, how do I multiply myself, right? How do I do more with less? Get outside of this calculator mode, right? Which is, one input, one output. Thanks for the memory. See you later. How do I start working different? And for me, it starts again, as we've talked about, it's a leadership development exercise, is essentially starting to work with AI like a poorly trained, but highly capable new coworker or new assistant takes a mental shift. And it is expect probabilistic outputs, not deterministic ones, right? I need to get comfortable with asking questions that are, okay to have a range of answers. If I asked AI or certain types of AI, what is the temperature outside? It might not give me a great answer. If I say, do I need to wear a jacket today? Well, that's a range of answers. And so it's probably a better type of question. So learning those initial habits of what it's okay to give away, understanding how to balance capability with capacity, right? What can I give away and how much can I give away? That's sort of the stuff that I'm starting to see emerge as this sort of super worker or this kind of AI enabled workforce comes along. Then it's building processes around those types of folks. But again, it comes down to giving them the right tools, giving them the safety and the time to get better at something. Because the problem is you put these new tools in the hands of experts, they get worse, less output in Ash terms. They create less output for the amount of time invested first. But then we get people who are brand new, our incoming folks, their time to proficiency shrinks dramatically. So the distance between those two is getting smaller for a while. And it's a really interesting time to be looking at workforce changes. So I'll say that's my first thoughts is let this be that the first workforce you lead will be digital, I think. And it starts at day one of whatever knowledge work or whatever job you're going to do, and start thinking with that approach has been really resonating with the clients I'm working with and honestly with the students I'm teaching.
This is interesting stuff because I think we were on a panel, I think January or February 24 in Florida. And we were both saying this. I was saying at the time that I want was it this year? I can't remember which of the years it was, but I was saying I want a 50-person business with no people. Mm-hmm. And you were saying something very similar in the digital workforce space for Accenture. And we were talking around the topic of how you can get agents or agentic workflows or knowledge bases or retrieval augmented generation vector database. So how you can structure this stuff so that you can, to some degree, with a great deal of accuracy, produce your voice evidenced with the things that you want without necessarily having to cope with the problem of hallucinations. Because the problem of hallucinations, and I'd have to check GPT 5.1 because I haven't looked at it. I've used it, but I haven't looked specifically at whether or not you can tweak some of the parameters that you can when you start to use these things in workflows, because you can look at top P and sampling temperature and all of these things to change how deterministic or probabilistic something is. But I don't think you can do that when you're just in a console, right? With any of these models.
Yeah, it's an API type level change. So it's not, they're not giving us the UI toggles to say, like one of the ones I love that they added recently was always offer a follow-up. And that's a toggle now that you can turn off. It's basically a way the system prompt is kind of giving you a little bit of accuracy. But to me, I'm like, all those hard-coded sort of hardware things take over like the LLM surfing that I think you and I've gotten both so good at doing, is feeling out a model with less interruption to it and kind of getting used to how it works.
Yeah. And I think this, just for everybody's watching, I think this idea of having some kind of agentic front end that you can converse with, whether that's text or voice, plus some kind of workflow capability supported by some kind of knowledge base and supported by retrieval, third-party tools as well, maybe if you want those.
Sure.
I think that is probably the golden space that we're playing in for 2026 for most companies. What do you think?
We call these, simple knowledge-bound agents, right? Is the way I'm talking to them. So could those be a utility agent in a multi-agent workflow? Of course they could. But I'm thinking of these things where I'll give you a perfect example. As I'm teaching our incoming analysts, I know I keep referring back to it, but it's fresh in my head. And it's also really cool to be in a room full of people that are absolute digital natives. They finished college, university, and they're probably the majority of their university. They've had these AI tools in their hands, whether or not how they've used them, what they've done with them. So they come in not thinking calculator. They come in thinking coworker. And then we just start honing that. So immediately what they do is they take a simple Copilot agent. Thanks, Microsoft, for taking something that means something and making it mean nothing. But that's what Microsoft likes to do. But Copilot agents, which are simply these knowledge-bound GPTs, adding in writing instructions, putting things in there, and adding essentially one worker to their team right off the rip. But you're absolutely right. What I'm seeing in companies is this need for take some bit of our company's knowledge, contextualize it to who we are. What do we call customers? What do we call employees? What things matter to us? What kind of things do we sell? Giving that sort of context engineered worldview to the simple agent, and then letting it have a clear set of tasks that it's good at and that it does well. And you're going to see these. I think we're in some organizations, out of the proliferation, the sort of the wild west of everybody go build whatever you want all the time, and really getting to like the key workflows that are enabled by this and getting that stuff to shrunk back down to these good knowledge-bound, instruction-driven agents with hallucinations kind of going away.
Yeah, and for the uninitiated who might be listening to this, there are various ways you can do this. I'm probably not going to go into the how, but you have some kind of workflow platform, you have some kind of vectorized database, you can link those things together. Most agents or assistants, regardless of whether you're using a GPT or a gem or something like that, have
Yep.
the ability to support with a knowledge base. Think about your prompts always. I'm not going to go into prompting here, but yeah, all of these things are kind of possible. And MCP, of course, is a thing as well as you go and explore. So with that, we have the interesting thing. The thing that you've just said is you've said it twice, in fact. So now I'm going to have to pick up on it, which is
Okay.
you've got people in the workforce, legacy skills, legacy capabilities, maybe even legacy systems and processes. And that coping with that is way more difficult than taking something that's greenfield, something that's blank, or something that really doesn't have any structure around it, and creating the structures natively to go and use agents, AI, assistants, workflows, all of this stuff. But most companies that we work with are going to have legacy things.
Mm-hmm.
We also have, of course, when we have these discussions, scrap it all and start again, or make some tweaks. Now, how difficult is it? I know it's difficult, but I want to hear your perspective on this.
Of course, yeah.
How difficult is it to steer or re-steer the oil tanker compared to just starting from scratch? Because I've started from scratch in my business, but you guys are older and bigger.
We are an oil tanker by, again, 800,000 people. And so it was a couple of years ago. Luckily, our job is to be at least 5 minutes ahead of every one of our most advanced client, right? I mean, that's the consulting world. And even now, as I'm working with, giant Fortune 100 companies, they're asking the same question. How do we pivot our workforce? And I think changing human behavior, hardest part of the job, right? Changing an agent behavior, crack in, mess with the system prompt, do a few things, flip the model, do small things, but changing people's hard. And so I think what you have to do is realize that every person is at a different angle. And you've heard me say this probably over more drinks than you've done over more panels, but human beings are garbage at large numbers. It is one of our critical flaws. And once you get more than about 10 or 15 somethings, they're not people, it's a thing. And that's, you could extrapolate that to lots of other places that it shows up, but I would say organizations is one of the biggest ones. 800,000 people is mad. It's a mad number of human beings, but even 10,000 people is hard to kind of paint with a single brush, and yet companies do it every time. So what I see is you start to see not these normal distributions with AI because of all the factors we talked about before, but you start to see these spikes in certain areas where good things are happening. The trick is to watch those and try and replicate them in an area that makes sense for the local area or the team that's doing it. You would think, right, technology folks are going to adopt this first. Not what we've been seeing. What we're seeing is people that are process driven are the ones that want to adopt this first because they can look at the wheels in the machine and go, boy, if I could just take something that is a nice, good rule and replace that function right there, we could save time. So I think the thing we're starting to see that's the hardest with moving an organization is expecting everybody to march at one time. And that's not new for AI, but it is so much more acute because of all the uncertainty, the constants of change. I used to talk about change as being or skills being this simmering pot of water, right? And my job as a learning person was to ensure that I was always keeping a steady stream of the right kind of skills coming in. Well, cloud kind of took that simmer up to maybe a little bit of a more steamy boil. AI has turned it to a rolling boil. We are dumping new knowledge into people as quickly as possible, and it is evaporating just as quickly because it's not like what we told them last week is now out of date. Some of it is flat out wrong. So recognizing that you're moving an organization of that size with that many people, it's going to take so much unlearning, relearning, stopping, and it is not ever going to be a one-shot deal. It has got to be a sustained change with sustained investment, both of time, money, resources, and there's no real good way to do it we've done the AI thing, now we can move on. And that's just the ugly truth that I think a lot of organizations are grappling with because they tried the one shot and now we're in the year 2 of everybody going, the one shot did nothing. Now, how do we do this right?
Reflecting on that, I think I probably expected something which I haven't seen. And that is more organizations to have, in the old days, this used to be called like robot process automation or business process automation. Now it's agentic workflows, but some kind of process drive towards making tech available within a process or making a process available within tech. That department, whatever that department's called, I haven't seen that being mobilized by many companies, but it seems like something that I would have expected. What do you think?
It's funny. I feel like you've been reading our press releases, but I mean, if you think about what Julie is trying to do and what we've done at Accenture with reinvention services, is essentially that. It is this idea of one of the courses that I get to fly around and teach agentic AI to is our process reinvention training, which is quite literally taking a look at L1s and through L4s and looking at how you do work today, looking at the inputs, the outputs, going through the 4 A's, right? What can I automate with usually RPA and usually, if it's a wet sweater, is it cold enough for a sweater? That's an easy one for AI. But if I need to know the exact temperature in Des Moines, Iowa right now, RPA is your better way to get there. There's better ways to do that than trying to build an agentic workflow. So we look at what we can automate. We look at what we can augment, where we put humans and technology together. That's the fun part. We look at the things we can axe, which is my favorite part, which is what's a process that's no value add. And then what do we acknowledge? Only human eyeballs and fingers need to be touching this. And so that's a lot of the work we do. What I'm starting to see clients ask for is, we don't have a way for our whole organization to step together the way you're talking about, where IT and HR, IT is the expert in the way technology gets deployed and run safely and effectively in an organization. HR are the experts in how work gets done. And I think there's not enough. I mean, we see like the ServiceNow, the Jackie Candies of the world. We're seeing places where they're trying to merge those functions. But I think it's not about merging the functions. I think it's about an equal distribution of expertise and understanding what each person's brought together for. And that's what the organizations that are figuring this out, that are getting these they take AI and they stick the AI department in HR, or they stick it in IT, or they stick it somewhere. It's everybody's in the AI department now. And that's the thing that I think is a finer point of what you were saying, which is, I'm not seeing this like mobilization of how do we rethink work step by step. We have clients doing it. That's the work I do now most of the time. But again, most people are trying to carve this elephant up a bite at a time. And unfortunately, this is an elephant that you have to kind of get on top of and ride. Like, you've got to bring the whole organization together, and doing these little bitty things. It's like little risk, no reward, big risk, big reward. And it's a hard pill for a lot of boards and a lot of companies to swallow.
So we dissect that just a little bit. So HR being the experts in how people do work, I wouldn't say how work is done, but
fair,
necessarily people. Operations is probably where the expertise around how work is done sits. And then you have IT, which should be, I don't know if it always is, but should be the experts in deploying the appropriate tech to allow work to be done. But now we're in a revolution where tech can do the work without people. Not all work, but there's a potential for that to happen.
Let me pause you there. Think through. We're also at the point where people can do work without tech. I could talk to Claude and get it to write me some pretty okay code. So I think there's also this leveling off of where everyone thinks they don't need one another, when in reality, we need each other more than ever. But please continue.
I mean, on that point, if you're talking to Claude, then that's people using tech, right?
Fair. I meant tech in the capital T, the end, like the group in the company, right. But tech lowercase t, everyone should be more enabled than ever.
Yeah. And I think looking to the things on the wall behind me, right? I've said this many times. I'll say it again, that first time I picked up one of these, I wasn't treading out solos. It took work. It took practice. And there are then the experiences, the skills around how do you cope when something goes wrong. And in the space that what you're saying, where you have people using voice working back and forth with some kind of agent or some kind of application to write code to do things that maybe were beyond them before. I think all of that's great stuff until you get to the point where something goes wrong, and then maybe people don't know how to fix it. So there's the whole work element, and I get on a soapbox about this every so often, because you see a lot of these, you know what, sign up to this thing, no experience, no coding experience required, you don't need any skills, just go off and do it, and it's going to be amazing, it's going to be easy. Things require work. If you're listening to this, things require work, right? So back to the digital workforce, or the potential for digital workers in the workforce. I used to call this, multi-agent frameworks versus human hierarchies synergistically working together to some kind of utopia. We're not there yet. And partly what I'm seeing is we're not there yet because the human hierarchies piece, back to what we said about normal distribution, and I've got a point which I'm going to steer us towards, right? You've got the human hierarchies, which are legacy hierarchies, legacy skills, legacy capabilities. You have normal distribution of capabilities in this space. Some folks are going to get there more quickly than others. Some folks are going to resist to the nth degree and pick up nothing. And then there's a distribution in the middle. if we take organizational redesign to its ultimate conclusion with this stuff, there are going to be job losses and there are going to be new tech systems created to work with the people that are left. And when that takes us to a reskilling revolution, because we need to think about reskilling and we also need to think about organizational culture, but we need to kind of think about that in the lens of who's going to be left in the new organization. It's a tricky concept for particularly L&D folks to get around because it's not really in their wheelhouse, but HR folks as well. Are you seeing that conversation happen in the context of the digital workforce?
I mean, that is the conversation in the digital workforce, which is what do we do with, we use nice words for it, freed capacity. Okay. That freed capacity means something. What do we do with FTEs? What do we do with, impacted is a fun word that gets thrown around a lot. Labor arbitrage. These are the things we're talking about because essentially there is the promise of this being automation, this being actual human out 100%. And what we're seeing more and more as this occurs is you have some displacement, but it is displacement of jobs that, didn't exist or won't exist anymore, but it's also creating new human specific jobs, which I think is also really interesting. You and I talked about this one before is, I'm seeing L&D folks who were originally a learning experience designer for knowledge-based content. Your job doesn't exist anymore, but what does exist is a need for business intimacy to understand and work with the experts. There's a need for what I'm starting to call knowledge stewards. The person who looks after the cognitive digital brain that keeps all of the content fresh. Their job is to ensure that that is fed correctly, that it's contextualized correctly to the world that it lives in, the business that it lives in, and that it's showing up in the outputs correctly. That's a new job that doesn't really exist now. And we're seeing this happen in lots of these agentic workflows, that sort of human on the loop, the agent boss, I think Microsoft likes to call it. That's new. But I don't want to glaze over your question because I think it was a good one. Are we seeing job? Yeah. But I don't think that's unique to this tech revolution. If you've been on too many panels with me and you've heard me tell the story of my mom a dozen times, but it's a good one. My mom worked at Verizon Wireless for over 30 years. It wasn't called that when she started, and it was barely called that when she left, but she started as a cordboard operator. Then that job stopped existing because digital switches or manual switches started coming in. And then new technology took her next job and her next job and her next job. But there were always new jobs that were being unlocked. This one's different. And I admit that because this is talking about work, doing the part of human work that we thought was sort of our last bastion, which was brain-based knowledge work. No computer's ever going to be able to look at something and discern and then pass it on and do work with it. Because now it can. I don't think this breaks everything. I think what we will start seeing is a shift in what we think are the important jobs for people. I think it's going to take a generation. I think it's going to take a while. But I think after a while, the displacement and the leveling off, my son, you would think, would love to go and be in a technology field, right? No, his ultimate act of rebellion. He makes music and he makes pizza. And when he doesn't make enough money making one, he makes the other and vice versa. And he loves it because it's real, right? He doesn't want a phone with a data plan. He's 22 years old. He doesn't want that. And I think we're going to see this rise of these sort of other types of jobs also starting to come into the world. I'll get to the point on your final question, which is, are we going to see job losses? Yes, we are. Are we going to see people, ushered out in the tens of thousands by every company out there? No, I think what you're starting to see is companies using AI as an excuse to re-level and readjust some sins of the past. During COVID, we grew our numbers of developers. We grew numbers of other things exponentially. And now we're starting to see ways to dial that back. We also have an economic climate where companies are trying to cut their way to growth. Doesn't work as well as you'd think. You get some short-term love out of it, but the long-term stuff is you got to spend to grow. And so I think what we're starting to see is companies doing this big inhale, and then this big exhale is going to be a lot of the growth in the hiring that we're hoping for. So, but it's going to be an inhale first.
The interesting point there, of course, is time, what the timeline might be. And I suspect that if you reflect a little bit on what we've seen in the media over the last 6 months, some of the big tech companies have shed jobs. And I wonder about the timescale of this, because in the short term, we can expect to see some layoffs. In the long term, we can expect to see some new jobs created. But I don't know how big the gap's going to be in the middle between people being out of work because of either real AI or the excuse of AI versus those new jobs being created, and crucially, the workforce having the skills to fill those new jobs. Do you think there's going to be a big gap? Do you think it's going to be, today and tomorrow? What do you think?
I hope. I would love to see it be a small gap, but I can tell you the reality that we're seeing is that companies are trying to self-fund these AI initiatives. Well, how do you self-fund? Well, as I like to colloquially call it, you eat your dessert before you eat your vegetables. You recognize the capital gains by labor arbitrage or whatever it may be, promising that the AI automation and tools are coming just behind it. And they're hoping that gap is small too. But you're talking about one of the most fundamental changes a company can go under, which is changing people, process, and technology simultaneously across all functions. The gap is going to exist. What we're seeing is the companies that have the most success are trying to, again, do this small, do this quick, do this in compartments, and they're seeing limited success. So the companies that sort of say, all right, we're going to do this the right way. Yes, this is going to cause us to shed some jobs. However, there are new jobs being created, and the ones that are sort of being able to carry that weight to bridge people from there to the next, those are the ones that are going to have the enduring sort of brand. Think of everybody that's not announcing the giant layoffs that they're doing. That's a correction. Those are the companies that are looking at inventing themselves, but retaining. Every company says, right, that everyone says that their people are their most important asset, right? Like every company says it. Yet what they mean is the work people do is our most important asset, right? And if I can get somebody else to do that work, so much the better. What you're seeing is the companies that really recognize that there is institutional knowledge. There is the understanding of how your company works, how its customers behave, the history, the stories. Those things are starting to have a quantifiable value, not because of the companies that are recognizing it and holding on to them, but because of what they're seeing happen to companies that are shedding those individuals and then having to hire them back in mass to go, actually, nobody knows how the Bob spreadsheet works because we let Bob go. And so now they got to bring Bob back in to decode that spreadsheet, and then 27 other people that were on similar teams. It's not as easy as just, you don't realize how much people become ingrained into the organizational undercarriage of your company until they're not there, and you go to put that foot down and then the leg falls off. And I think we're already starting to see this sort of return ship. Come on back to wherever. We'd love to have you back. We know you learned some things. Sorry about the other thing, but we'd love to have you come back and help us figure this out.
I mean, just to take this out of AI for a second towards just the world of work, I don't think I've ever seen a company that's done let's call it restructuring. I don't think I've ever seen it done well. I think I've seen it done, by numbers.
Yeah.
We've got 100 people in this department. We need it to be 50. Let's just get rid of a bunch of people. And usually it's down to whoever's friends with the manager or whatever it is, not
Whoever's
necessarily
cheapest.
based on value. So I think even if that stuff has to happen, I think there are ways to do that kind of thing which are more valuable than others. But it takes me down the road of, as I was thinking it as you were saying it, we have tacit knowledge, we have stories, we have experiences, we have things that are undocumented. Now, in an ideal world, everything would be documented, but we know that it isn't.
Of course.
But as we start to move into an age where everybody is effectively using a voice agent or some kind of, let's say, overt surveillance, then we start to get to a world where knowledge management of everything is more possible. And we do have the potential for new roles. We talked earlier about effectively a knowledge-based manager or something like that. We would start to move into the world where knowledge management becomes more important. And that might be an area of upskilling for any L&D folks that are listening to this, if you want to get into that kind of thing. But how many, I haven't seen this yet, but how many, have you seen any companies that are moving into this more active or overt surveillance mode where, for example, every response from a Copilot, every chat thread in a GPT is effectively tacit knowledge? Is anybody capturing this?
I mean, Copilot tries, right? Microsoft wants this. One of my favorite sort of uses of Copilot at work is I ask for a recap of my last week and I say, look at everything, even documents shared with me that I haven't reviewed yet. And I'm expecting to see these 10 client names or these 10 project names. And I want a nice little review of them. And it does a fair job of it, but it's looking at chat messages. It's looking at teams that I'm in. It's looking at everything. Now, again, what's it doing? We know what it's doing behind the scenes is it's dropping them into a massive vector database. It's storing the relationship to the information, not the information itself. And so it's really not fully vectorizing it. It's basically, remembering threads. It's remembering locations, which is fine for what it does. I don't think we've seen a company with enough. I think what we're seeing mostly, the surveillance is around usage patterns. How many turns per interaction? What's the average length of a response? What models are how many tokens are we spending? I think we're seeing a lot more of the expense management side of it and not the knowledge gathering portion of it. And that's a thing that, to your point, I think it starts to become a gap in an organization, because again, and I'm sure I'm quoting or stealing a quote from somebody else, but AI tools don't replicate expertise. They amplify it, but they also amplify the absence of expertise. And so I think what ends up happening is they're very good at making something that looks like you're an expert in it, because it uses nice rounded metaphors and it uses alliteration and makes you sound cool and smart and impressive, but it's amplifying the lack of expertise. So a real expert looks at it and goes, oh, this is crap. Same reason, when we see people get in trouble for sitting across AI things that are not so great. So not going to name names again, Ash, I won't. Never.
I won't this time either.
Good. Guys, go Google just which company got in trouble for, or ask your GPT if you prefer. I say go Google still. And I'm like, I don't use Google anymore, right? Because for the most part, I'm asking something else. But yeah, I think the ending note there is that you're going to continue to see big change in this space. Like knowledge management, the cool stuff's cool again, right? I think like the old HR, like tried and true axioms, human behavior, Bloom's taxonomy, like the ways human brains actually work. We're learning more about that because of LLMs. We're learning more about the way humans actually reason. We don't reason in chain of thought. LLMs do. We reason more in vectors and relationships. LLMs still use chain of thought for their reasoning. If we put the vector database with the vector reasoning, wow, that's stuff that quantum's required. We're basically getting as close as we can, right? But I don't think we're seeing anybody truly capitalize on it. I think the only other place that I see people trying to capitalize on the knowledge, as it just came to me, is skills. They're trying to use sort of observation as this overt, I love it, overt surveillance, as we're calling it. I think that's my favorite new Ash-ism is, I think, overt surveillance. You might just call it, data collection, but overt surveillance ism. But yeah, using this overt surveillance, one of my colleagues says, observation is the new LMS. And I'm like, maybe, right? What's the purpose of training, right? That's another good one. I'm a big believer that skill building, training, is the effect of doing the right thing over time with help. It's not the amount of hours I sat and the NPS score that I gave. So do we need formalized training? 70, 20, 10, all those questions. Maybe not.
I mean, I don't think we do. And I'm drawn to the educational paradigm of Vygotsky, right? Where we say, if we were to take 2 3-year-olds and we pair them up with 2 5-year-olds, we would expect scaffolding, support. We would expect some kind of co-working. We would expect each of them to fill their development zone slightly differently and therefore reach their potential and stretch goals and all of these things slightly differently. So now we have people who are working with a machine scaffolder. So they're being supported through what they can do, their capabilities with a machine. And it kind of means for me 2 things. One is that we need to measure things like skills differently, because it's no longer I'm this good at this particular skill. It's when I'm supported appropriately with the tech and with the more knowledgeable other and all of these other things, what my development, what my output achievement could be. So that's kind of one thing. But the other thing is what you were saying about how people think. And I'm going to get this down while I'm thinking about it, right?
Good.
You made me think about it.
Yeah, so that's our whole point. When we get together, man, I always come away with 6 pages of notes, so I love it.
So what I was thinking about when you were talking was, we started off with this kind of idea of 0-1 multi-shot prompting. And we moved on to chain of thought and a bunch of other things, which were different ways that some of these models, some of these applications can achieve something that resembles human reasoning.
Hard air quotes on reasoning, but yes, resembles is a good word. Yep, 100%.
So that's the trajectory of the market, and everyone's trying to get to this thing as soon as they possibly can. And they're talking about AGI. I haven't seen under the hood. I haven't seen what these different companies are doing. But we started off back in the day, take it 20, 30 years back, we started talking about things like machine learning and structural equation modeling and then neural networks, which were something like a complex multi-level structural equation model that allows some kind of recursive step reweighting of parameters that allows you to then reach something that has the minimum error in the system. It doesn't seem much of a stretch to say we go from shot prompting to and reinforcement learning through to something that resembles that is chain of thought, multiple things in a single chain, to multiple things that are in a parallel, to something that starts to resemble the concept of a neural network, but has lots of LLM capabilities within it in the nodes itself. Just wanted to get that out there while I was thinking about it.
It's fascinating. And I again, I'll just be clear here. Like, I'll say maybe 10% of my thoughts are my own, right? And I think that's the old, humans last. The thing we do brilliantly is creativity. Really? What if human creativity is not pattern recognition and evolution-based fear? But I'll digress for a second there. That's a bigger topic that I'm sure I'm going to get flamed for. So, but it is very interesting to think about what these new things we've discovered called LLMs, discovered, invented, whatever you want to call it. What are they actually? We're studying them now. We're not like everyone thinks, oh, we've created this tool. We know exactly how it works. No, we don't know at what point a pattern recognizing machine like this one gets enough information added on top of it to then do this thing called consciousness, sapience, sentience. We don't know. We don't know when it happens. We don't know why it happens. It is one of the great mysteries. And we've filled that hole with religion. We filled it with philosophy. We filled it with technology. We filled it with neuroscience. We filled it with a lot of things. But we don't know. We think and we care and we believe and we have faith, but we don't know. And I think what we're starting to see is people starting to project that. Have we hit that point with technology? Maybe, maybe not. But we are essentially collectively as a scientific community poking LLMs with sticks to see how they respond. And, you saw the one recently. It was funny. You talked about people learning with the proper support and scaffolding. It makes me go back to that darn MIT study, right? There was a study back 20, 30 years ago called Is Google Making Us Dumber? Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Because essentially it was the beginning of the thought around cognitive offloading. Your brain says, I don't know about you, Ash, when I was a kid, I had 100 7-digit numbers saved in my brain. Mom's house, dad's house, grandma's house, the school, How many 7-digit numbers you got saved in your brain right now? Not too many. Because I have cognitively offloaded those. Your brain is good at remembering either the information or where it's stored, right? Like a desktop shortcut on your PC, right? I don't need to go remember the thing. I can offload it. Same thing with the new MIT study, right? It's essentially the same thing. ChatGPT for a month, asked him to write articles with it, and then we took it away and we asked him to perform at the same level. Your skill was augmented because it was augmented. We should assume that thing's going to exist, so we don't train people to do it in a vacuum. We train them to work with the new tool and to adapt their ways of working as these tools change and improve. But that, to me, is the new skill, is that adaptability to changing tool sets. But right now, if you just started learning, you'd probably be pretty good. Like, just start using the tools that are out there and you're going to work differently. You don't have to go. Point one is that unless you do what we do, and your job is to help people be aware and advise on the latest thing. Most companies I work with are like, we gave everybody Copilot. Can you help us make it good? Yeah, I can. And that's okay because Copilots continue to be advanced and everything's continuing to be advanced. So the trick is to teach the things that endure, how to talk iteratively, how to understand how these reason, chain of thought, right? Understanding that they are stochastic representations of the way you think and work. They are not imitation. They are not the things, they're not the work you create. So leaning into that, the understanding side of it, and then reps and sets, right? Expertise, just doing it over time, getting your 10,000 hours. That's the only way we haven't figured out that one either. We don't know how to compress that 10,000 hours yet. Give people help, sure, but they still are going to need help with the thing. Giving me a bike makes me get from here to there faster. I still had to learn how to ride a bike. And every time I get a new bike, I got to learn the little tweaks and differences. It's no different.
Yeah, that's probably true. There's an aspect of repetition, even when you were saying, you remember, I bet you still remember, because I do, I bet you still remember your phone number from the house you grew up in when you were a kid,
100%,
right?
Because that's down deep. That's burned past all of the other imprinting layered on top of it. But yeah, that's important to you to remember. And also because it's probably tied to emotion or tied to something else, or it's connected to multiple other nodes, right? Or relational database up here. Or
there's repetition. Because the number of times you would have to have told somebody that number, or you wrote it down, or you had to
dial it yourself by putting buttons.
Rotary phone, right?
Yeah, I was about to say. We're showing our age,
So,
Ash. We're showing our age. I mean, I'm showing my age already today, but
yeah, repetition is key. So even in the new tools that we have, doing things, doing them again, refining what you do, I think is absolutely key to getting better at this stuff. So one eye on the clock. We're approaching the end of our hour. It's gone very quickly.
ow.
We should do another one, right?
Yes, I'm
But
ready.
first of all, I will say, David, thank you for the time today. I hope we do another one soon. And
I can't wait. Let's do it. And like I said, mark me down. I'll come to London next time. We'll go and have a possible lunch. We'll do it in studio. I can't wait.
Sounds amazing. If you're watching this, thank you for watching all the way to the end. You can find Reels, Shorts on YouTube Shorts, Instagram, TikTok. You get some Reels on LinkedIn as well, of course. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're watching it on Spotify, don't forget to follow the channel. See you guys later.